Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Learn Academic English, where I teach intermediate and advanced level lessons for English learners who want to be successful in school and work. Today's video is going to help you with both of those things for your writing. I'm continuing my series about sentences, and I'll leave a link to that series above, about the rules of commas. There are 10 basic rules of commas that everybody needs to know. This is especially important if you use English in writing. So you might be thinking, well, I already know how to use commas because I use commas in my native language. But the problem is that languages have different rules for using commas. So if you're an English learner, you need to know these rules. And even if English is your native language, this is a great place to get a refresher. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you to please give this video a like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, if you find this video helpful. And make sure that you check the description box below because I always leave a question that you can use to practice with me, and I have a handout of these rules. So in today's video, I'm going to give you a bunch of example sentences, and all of the examples are on the topic of stress. So let's look at the first rule of commas, which is to use a comma between two clauses when you use fanboys. Okay, what are fanboys? Fanboys are coordinating conjunctions, and this is when we are making a compound sentence by joining two independent clauses with one of the coordinating conjunctions. And if you want to learn more about compound sentences, I have a video all about that. Remember that fanboys are the conjunctions for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And we use these when we combine two independent clauses like this. For example, independent clause and independent clause, we're going to use a comma there before the conjunction. Let's look at the example. Modern life has many conveniences, but people report more stress than ever before. This is a compound sentence because the first clause has a subject and a verb, and the second clause has a subject and a verb. So each of these is an independent clause. We use a coordinating conjunction to combine them, and we need to put the comma. Now, it's important to know that sometimes you can see some differences in this rule. There are some comma rules that are more flexible than other rules, and this is one of them. If the clauses are especially short, we will often skip this comma. And keep in mind that if there is no subject over here, that's actually not a compound sentence and you're not going to put a comma there. All right, let's go to the second rule, which is to separate items in a series. What is a series? A series is when you have three or more things, like three nouns or three verbs. For example, stress can affect diet, sleep, and mood. So how many things do we have? We have three of them. They are nouns. This is a series. So we're going to use a comma before each one, including before the last one. This is called an Oxford comma. There is another type of rule where this comma is not used, but usually in school or more formal writing, we are going to use this comma. It is common sometimes in magazines or other type of writing to see this comma omitted, but again, in formal writing, especially for school, you should use this last comma as well. Let's look at another example. Stress can hinder sleep, alter your mood, and cause illness. Here we have three things. We have three verb phrases: hinder, sleep, alter your mood, cause illness. And again, we're going to use the comma to separate the three parts. Okay, let's look at the next rule, to separate two similar adjectives. These are called coordinate adjectives. This is a tricky rule that needs its own video devoted to it. But basically, you're going to think that if you have two adjectives that are of a similar type, then you're going to use a comma to separate them. Let me show you an example to make it clear. Meditation is an easy, useful technique to reduce stress. Okay, here we have two adjectives, And usually we don't use and to separate those adjectives. We would usually use just this comma. This is quite different from other ways that we use commas because usually if we have only two things, we don't use a comma to combine them, but here we do. So here these coordinate adjectives are both describing technique, and they are basically similar types of adjectives. What would be a different type of adjective is if one of them was a nationality, like American, or if one of them showed size, like large. But here these are both describing technique, and they are describing them kind of in a similar way that they're describing the quality, so we're going to use a comma to separate them. Okay, we still have 7 more rules to go, so let's look at the next one. The next rule is to set off an introductory phrase or conjunctive adverb. For example, in my humble opinion, we don't do enough to prevent stress. According to research, stress can be devastating for health. However, there are techniques to reduce stress. So all 3 of these are introducing the sentence. They are phrases, or here we have a conjunctive adverb that goes at the beginning of the sentence, and we use a comma at the end. Number 5, in a complex sentence. So a complex sentence has a dependent clause and an independent clause joined with a comma, and this is when the dependent clause comes first. What's a dependent clause? It's a clause that begins with a subordinating conjunction like when, if, before, after, etc. Because, for example, when I have time, I meditate for 5 to 10 minutes. Here we need to put a comma at the end of the dependent clause. Number 6, to set off a non-restrictive adjective clause or an appositive. All right, let's look at the first one. What is a non-restrictive adjective clause? It is an adjective clause, so it's a clause. It has a subject and a verb, and it describes the noun that comes right before it, okay? A non-restrictive adjective clause means that it's not essential to the sentence. It adds extra information, it adds useful information, but it's not necessary to the sentence. In other words, you can take it out and the sentence would still make sense. You would still know what we are talking about. For example, meditation, which can include visualizations, encourages us to be in the present moment. Okay, so the subject here is meditation, that's a noun, and then we have this adjective clause, which can include, so this is the subject of this little clause, and this is the verb, visualizations, okay? This adjective clause describes meditation. It gives more information about meditation, but if we take it out, we will still understand the sentence. So let's try to take it out. Meditation encourages us to be in the present moment. Do we still know what this is? Yes, we do. That means that this adjective clause is not necessary. It's nice, it gives extra information that we like, but it's not essential. And for that reason, we use commas. And you can think of the commas as like a little, like a hook that you can take the adjective clause out or put it back in. Okay, a similar idea is using an appositive. An appositive is a noun phrase that describes or gives more information about a noun. For example, meditation, an ancient practice, helps reduce stress. So in this sentence, meditation is the subject, helps is the verb, and then we have this noun phrase that gives extra information about meditation. It's not a clause, it's a noun phrase, and it's not necessary to the sentence. So again, we use commas to show that we can take it out or we can put it in. Moving on to rule number 7, to set off a direct address. What does that mean? A direct address is when you call someone's name. For example, Jenna, stress is a problem for me too. So if you're writing an email or you're using this in writing, you're going to use a comma after the person's name. Notice that this is also an example of how we use a comma before the word to. That's a separate rule that I didn't include in today's video, but we always use a comma before to at the end of a sentence. All right, number 8, to set off direct quotations. The doctor stated, stress management is a priority. So the punctuation with quotations is a little bit tricky. We're going to use a comma before the quotation, so it's after the verb. Then we put the quotation mark, and then at the end of the sentence, we put the period inside the quotation mark at the end. Anyway, comma goes here. Rule number 9 for numbers and dates. If you have a number of more than 3 digits, you're going to use a comma to separate those digits. For example, 3,500, you use a comma to separate the 1,000 and 100 place. However, I have to tell you that with a number like this, where there's just, for example, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, just one digit here, we often skip the comma, but according to the more formal rules, we are going to use a comma there. But we always put it for any longer number. Be careful, because in the United States, we do not use a comma for decimals. For example, 4.9, we don't use a comma here. This is used in some other places, but in the US, we use the period. And finally, between the day and year, we're going to use a comma. For example, today is March 24th, 2022. Okay, and our last set of rules is about places. We use a comma between the city and the state, and between the city and the country. For example, people in Sacramento, California, seem very stressed. Sacramento is the city, and so we're going to put a comma before the state. If we also included the country, we would put another comma and then the country. And between the elements of an address, for example, 108 Main Street, so here's the number and the street. Then we put a comma, the city, comma, the state, comma, the country. The only exception to this, and this one is tricky, is that if we include the zip code, it goes after the state and there's no comma. So if we included the zip code, we would take out the comma and put the zip code there after the state. I hope this video about the comma rules in English helps you to feel more confident in your writing. If you have any questions, as always, let me know and I'll be happy to answer them. Make sure that you like this video and leave a comment if you found it helpful, and I'll see you back here next time. Take care.